Hello there. By Thursday night, the two-day historic visit of President Bola Tinubu to the United Kingdom will come to an end. The visit is marked by a blend of high-level diplomacy and prestigious royal traditions. It was at the official invitation of King Charles III. Now, this landmark event marks the first state visit by a Nigerian leader to the UK in nearly 4 decades. The last being the military president, General Ibrahim Babangida's visit in 1989. At that time, the British Prime Minister, Margaret Thatcher, was in office. Now, the Nigerian leader was accompanied by the First Lady, Senator Oluremi Tinubu, who were both received with full ceremonial honors at the Windsor Castle, including a carriage procession and a grand state banquet hosted by the King and Queen Camilla. The visit is strategically aimed at strengthening bilateral relations through high-level talks with Prime Minister Keir Starmer and the signing of a significant agreement such as a £746 million British pounds deal for the upgrading of Nigerian ports. The engaging with the British monarchy and business leaders, President Tinubu seeks to unlock new investment opportunities and reinforce Nigeria's standing as a key global partner and Africa's largest democracy. The agreement on the key maritime sector targets the total refurbishment of the Lagos Port Complex, Apapa, and the Tinkan Island Port Complex. This investment is expected to introduce digital automation and state-of-the-art cargo handling systems, significantly reducing trade bottlenecks and positioning Nigeria as a premier logistics hub for West and Central Africa. Now, beyond infrastructure, the agreement will generate £236 million in contract for British firms, including a £70 million boost for British Steel. Security and trade remain the twin pillars of President Tinubu's visit, with both nations seeking to sustain their long-standing partnership through concrete actions. Now, even though Britain colonized Nigeria for over 65 years, diplomatic engagements during Tinubu's 2-day stay emphasizes a partnership of equals rooted in shared democratic values. Now, the high-level bilateral talks with Prime Minister Keir Starmer took place at number 10 Downing Street. Of course, you know that that's the seat of the British government. The discussions on security centered on a fresh security alliance to address regional and domestic threats. The areas of focus include deepening collaborations on counterterrorism and intelligence coordination to stabilize Nigeria and other West African countries. In terms of maritime security and cybersecurity as well, and of course kidnapping response through strengthening of Nigeria's counterterrorism center and multi-agency kidnap fusion cell. Now, other issues raised during the discussions include legal migration. The Nigerian leader during a business summit with UK's private investors highlighted emerging opportunities in energy, mining, and the creative economy. Now, discussions on the creative economy focuses on films, music, and fashion sectors where Nigerian talents already has a footprint in the UK. It was formalized through a new memorandum of understanding to protect intellectual property and boost exports. Now, by showcasing the liberalization of the foreign exchange market and new tax incentives, the Nigerian delegation aimed to attract fresh foreign direct investments to support the target goal of $1 trillion economy. Now, the diplomatic push underscores Nigeria's renewed global relevance as it navigates its economy, markets, and democracy. On the program tonight, this will be our focus. Stay with us. Now, you're welcome to your prime political program, Democracy Today on AIT. I am Enemaku Ojochebe. Don't go away.
The issues as they break, the multitude, the political figures, the state and non-state actors.
It's a serious threat to democracy.
And our governments seem to be incapable of protecting
the scheming.
This is not a period we should sit back and go.
every part of this country is equal.
The intrigues.
There can be no one person that is bigger than the party.
Deft moves and the momentous declaration.
We didn't get any protection.
I'm not particularly against any
anybody.
We track and capture them all.
I don't believe it was for that reason in politics.
Follow in-depth analysis and no-holds-barred interviews.
Armed forces of the country is well capable. They need the political will.
Are they just waking up from sleep? Is there complacency?
Feel the pulse of happenings in the political arena on AIT Democracy Today. Widely acclaimed authority on politics. Monday to Friday, 7 p.m. Nigerian time.
Hello and welcome to political development across Nigeria. Now, barely few hours after President Bola Tinubu returned to Nigeria from a 2-day working visit to the United Kingdom, he joined other Muslim faithful at Dodon Barracks for the Eid al-Fitr prayers, which marks the end of the 30 days fasting period. President Tinubu, who later addressed journalists shortly after prayers by the Imam of Lagos State, Sheikh Suleiman Abdul Noila, commended Muslim faithful for successfully completing one of the tenets of Islam, and they also urged them to imbibe the lessons of Ramadan learnt and applying same of their daily lives as citizens of Nigeria. Now, the People's Democratic Party, PDP, and the African Democratic Congress, ADC, including other opposition parties, have urged Nigerians to draw strength from the values of faith, sacrifice, and resilience despite the country's many challenges. The parties, in the goodwill messages on the occasion of Eid al-Fitr, noted that the lessons of Ramadan should inspire unity, compassion, and a renewed commitment to building a more just, peaceful and prosperous Nigeria for all. Now, Muslim clerics and government officials in the Ekiti State have called for credible and violence-free elections ahead of 2027 general election and 2026 gubernatorial poll in the state. This was after the Muslim faithful celebrate this year's Eid al-Fitr in grand style. And finally, on today's edition, after about 15 members of the Forum of World Chairman of the All Progressives Congress in Kababono local government area unanimously passed vote of no confidence on the senator representing Kogi West Central District, Sunday Karimi, following alleged series of actions that may be destabilizing the party, undermining its leadership and promoting anti-party activities within the state chapter that the senator has decided to embark upon. In a swift reaction, an APC stakeholders in Kogi West has dismissed the report vote of no confidence on Senator Sunday Karimi, urging journalists to verify facts and questioning the credibility of the originating bloc. A key stakeholder of the All Progressives Congress who spoke on condition of anonymity has dismissed the reports of vote of no confidence against the senator, describing it as misleading and unverified, lacking credibility. On the last note, we've come to the end of today's edition of Political Development across the country. Many thanks for staying tuned. Back to the studio with you, Enemaku Ojochekbe.
We, the 15 members of the Forum of World Chairmen of the All Progressive Congress, APC, in Kababono local government hereby issues this press statement to formally communicate our unanimous vote of no confidence on Senator representing Kogi West Senatorial District, Senator Sunday Karimi, following series of actions that are capable of destabilizing the party, undermining its leaderships, and promoting anti-party activities within the state chapter.
As grassroots leaders and custodians of the party structure at the world level, we have carefully observed recent developments and engagements involving the senator. After extensive consultations across the world, the forum has resolved that the continuous conduct of the senator is inconsistent with the principles of loyalty, discipline, and collective responsibility upon which the APC was founded.
By Engineer Joseph, whom you sent, he discharged that one. By the time they arrived in Lokoja here, they were quartered at Ayonote. What's the name of the hotel? Yes. Instead of going to sell, they went to the hotel. It's you, sir. You were charged to court for speaking what is beyond our mouth. When we say don't dabble into our traditional matters. We were charged to court in Abuja, knowing that our minimum wage salary is not even enough to transport us to Abuja. If they charge us in Lokoja here, we will find transport. But we were charged to
If you're just tuning in, this is Democracy Today on AIT. We're discussing President Tinubu's UK visit, which is at the instance of the British monarch, the King Charles III. And on this program last night, I had a very fruitful encounter with my colleague, Ijoma Osama, who is in the UK. And today she filed a report. Take a look.
It's been a whirlwind 2 days for President Bola Ahmed Tinubu and the First Lady Oluremi Tinubu as they conclude a 2-day state visit to the United Kingdom. On Wednesday, they were received by the King Charles III and Queen Camilla at the historic 900-year-old Windsor Castle, the traditional home of the British monarch. Later in the evening, they were feted at a lavish state banquet attended by some of the most powerful figures in both Nigeria and British societies. And today, it was time to get to signing deals and memoranda.
I believe firmly that when rain clouds gather, we can tighten the grip of friendship between us and, in so doing, reinforce the central role of the Commonwealth in our shared future. We can learn from Nigeria and the best of the UK and Nigeria's partnership and harness the advantage that comes from our common languages, our similar legal systems, and the web of cultural ties and spiritual connections that provide such deep trust between us.
It is particularly historic. Windsor has stood as a symbol of continuity, witnessing the steady evolution of institutions that have shaped governance, culture, and public life, not only in Britain, but far beyond these shores.
President Tinubu arrived at number 10 Downing Street, the home of the British Prime Minister, posed at the famous Black Door for pictures and a handshake with Prime Minister Keir Starmer before both men ducked inside to begin their meeting. The visit underscores a growing economic partnership with bilateral trade now at the record level of about $10.7 billion a year and Nigerian companies expanding operations in Britain. Today, both countries committed to deepening bilateral relations, attracting foreign investment, and modernizing key infrastructure to support economic growth. A major highlight was the signing of a £746 million financing agreement between the UK Export Finance, the Nigerian Ports Authority, and the Federal Ministry of Finance. The deal will fund the refurbishment of two key maritime infrastructure, the Lagos Port Complex, Apapa Quays, and the Tinkan Island Port Complex. Other deals were signed in the trade and security sectors. This visit comes at a pivotal moment in Nigeria-Britain relations. The United Kingdom remains one of Nigeria's key partners in trade, defense, and development. But beyond economics, the relationship is deeply rooted in history, shaped by colonial rule that ended in 1960 and sustained today by strong diaspora connections. Analysts are describing it as a recalibration of that relationship from one defined by history to one increasingly driven by mutual economic interest and global positioning. For the UK, strengthening ties with Africa's largest economy supports its post-Brexit strategy of expanding global trade links. For Nigeria, Closer engagement offers investment opportunities and access to international financial markets. However, the relationship is not without its tensions. Issues such as governance concerns, security challenges, and different political narratives continue to shape perceptions on both sides. Notably absent from the visit schedule is a meeting with the UK opposition leader Kemi Badenoch, who, although of Nigerian descent, has previously been critical of Nigeria's governance record. President Tinubu was accompanied by a high-profile delegation, including the Senate President Godswill Akpabio, Attorney General and Minister of Justice Prince Lateef Fagbemi, the Minister of Solid Mineral Dele Alake, the Minister of State for Foreign Affairs Ambassador Bianca Ojukwu. Other members of the delegation include the Minister of Finance and Coordinating Minister of the Economy, Wale Edun, the Minister of Industry, Trade and Investment, Dr. Jumoke Oduwole, and the Minister of Defense, General Christopher Musa.
All right. Now, before our conversations tonight, let me quickly inform you that President Tinubu also engaged Nigerians in diaspora in the UK. It's a huge community that remains a vital bridge for remittances and cultural exchanges between the two nations. All right. Thanks for joining us one more time. My guest is a former U.S. Army captain, and he's also a political analyst. And I'm talking about Captain Bish Johnson. Many thanks for joining us on the program tonight. It's always a pleasure having you on Democracy Today on AIT. Let me begin with this because it's actually also, one of our talking points. The world, this is the Eid celebration period. Even though there are, certain disparities, controversies, sort of, about when the Eid prayer should be observed and all of that. Some persons in Sokoto in Nigeria observed theirs today. Some are waiting for it tomorrow. But all the same, it's almost becoming a recurring decimal or some sort of ugly tradition that during festivities, including Eid celebrations, there will be explosions and killings and terrorist attacks and all of that. Just before President Tinubu departed the country, there were explosions in Maiduguri. Several tens of people died, hundreds were injured, and all of that. So, has this come to stay? Will it end, or how can the government tackle it, especially when there are festivities? Remember, Easter is just around the corner as well.
Okay. Yeah. Good evening, and thank you for having me on Democracy Today. Good evening, viewers. We have been on this issue now for more than a decade now. Whether it's around festivity times or outside festivity time, we've always had insecurity problem, and we're still having insecurity problem. However, when it happens around festivity time, the goal of terrorists or insurgents, however we want to describe them, is just to use minimal weapon to achieve massive objective. So they know that around festivity time, people will gather in places of interest, whether it's a worship place or markets where they're going for shopping and all that kind of stuff. So they want to use just one weapon to kill or maim as many people as they can. Now, that it happened when the president is traveling overseas, particularly to the UK, for this historic visit. From what you have just alluded in your introduction, for nearly 4 decades, he's the first president of this country to visit the United Kingdom. So it means that these terrorists are also following the activities of government. And so to that extent, it could be to also discredit the president by creating this insecurity upheaval at the time that he is departing the country for such a historic visit.
All right. You see, among some of the agreements that they've signed already, it includes border security, defense, and what have you. And you know that Nigeria has been a very cordial partner of the UK, in terms of security and defense for many decades now. For instance, Nigerian defense organizations, as the Army, the Air Force, and the Navy, they actually, send personnel to UK, I think Sandhurst or so, for training and all of that. Now, will anything be different this time around, considering the fact that, back home, the security of lives especially is so very fragile right now because, as you know, people die, people are being killed every day, and the borders are porous and what have you. Will these agreements that were signed today, bring anything different and hopeful from the meetings?
Well, they're supposed to. They're supposed to make impact, but from past experiences, we've seen where these agreements are signed and they are not properly followed up. So it depends. They may make impact if after signing this agreement, the two parties stick to the terms of the agreement that they signed and they ensure the full implementation. If they do that, of course, there will be impact. But if that doesn't happen, it will go the way previous and past memoranda of understanding have always gone. Now, another point I have to read right here is that, most of these agreements are government policies, and they take a lot of time. You have to articulate these policies before you now move into the execution phase. And so all this will take quite a bit of time before the impact can be felt. Don't be surprised that whatever agreement that comes out of this visit may not even take effect until after the coming election. So those are some of the things that we have to understand, that we have to consider whenever there is this signing of memorandum of understanding between countries. It's not just only Nigeria. It happens with so many other countries. But I can tell you that there is no more important strategic partner to Nigeria than the United Kingdom. And the reason is because of the long shared history between Nigeria and the United Kingdom. There's no foreign nation that understands and knows the in and out of this country more than the British, because of the number of years that they stayed in this country during the colonial era. They understand the landscape, they know the history, they know the people. And so I consider them the most strategic partnership that Nigeria can ever build. And if you look at the United States sometimes, before Trump, before there's any foreign policy decision by the United States, particularly in Africa, they like to defer to their European partners because of the long history of those their European partners with African nations. So for Nigeria, of course, is Britain. And so no other partner will be more strategic and more important than such a partner.
I understand that other discussions that were on the table, especially between the president and the Prime Minister Keir Starmer, had included visas, migration, and these are actually very burning issues on the table at the moment, especially in the UK. Now, you know that also the UK government is dealing with illegal migration a lot. Now, not just from Nigeria, though, so that people will not come and think, well, Nigerians are the only ones, traveling illegally. But at the same time, the UK government or the UK immigration is overwhelmed. Now, do you think the UK may, to some extent, scale down on the stiffness of some of its immigration policies, towards Nigeria? Because recently, they have not been really welcoming some of those policies.
Okay. Nigeria, from my understanding, is not on the top list of those who migrate to the United Kingdom illegally. Nigerians are very much rooted in the British society. And not just only Britain, even in the United Kingdom, we are one of the most highly educated population in the world. And so most Nigerians who travel already they travel with degrees and the skills. And these are some of the things that some of all these aging societies, such as the United Kingdom, are looking for. And so it's a matter of how you implement the law, and also a matter of who do you want to admit to your country. If they're looking to boost their boost their aging workforce with foreign workers, I don't think there's any better place for the United Kingdom to look to than Nigeria, because we speak the same language, as you heard the king said. So we share the same language with the British. We share almost the same culture. We have a lot of historical ties. So it's easier for Nigerians to assimilate into the British society than probably most or any other country on the planet, because of this shared history and language and culture that we have with the British people.
Okay.
And so I don't see that to be an issue. I just think it's just a matter of how do you implement the policies.
There were talks about, sharing bilateral talks and then sharing intelligence and what have you regarding security. Let's go back to the issue of security, really, because this is an area where you are very well, rooted and domiciled. Now, just like the United States government intervened some time ago, during the Christmas Day intervention in Sokoto, and where they attacked, intervened in the terrorist enclave in Sokoto, it was a bit of sigh of relief for many people in Nigeria. Many people welcomed it, although there are divergent opinions. Now, in the area, looking at the body language of British Prime Minister Keir Starmer, for instance, especially in his stance in the ongoing war between U.S., Iran, and Israel, he clearly pointed it out that the British government will not be intervening in terms of the bombings and what have you, but can only allow the U.S. use their bases. Now, in the case of Nigeria, do you think it will be a very easy walk in the park, let me put it that way, for the British government to intervene in what is going on in Nigeria? Because you will agree that it is overwhelming, the military organizations are overwhelmed, and serious intervention is needed. So do you think that can work?
Why not? It will work. Let's have this. Let's take this in context.
Okay.
The Europeans are a little more conservative in going to war. If you listen to some of the reasons they have given why they are not intervening in Iran, they were not consulted in the first instance before the war started. And so for some of them, I think it's a neglect or an insult to them. And some of these leaders are also dealing with their own domestic political issues. And so the Iran war is not popular in their various countries. So it's not something that they will dabble into just like that. And that is why you are seeing them being very, very careful in trying to get involved in a war that you don't really even know what are the objectives, as they've been all over the map trying to define what the objective getting into Iran is. And so they are more conservative in that aspect. Now, in the aspect of Nigeria, the British people have been working with Nigeria for decades and decades on security matters. Either your intro or that of Ijoma, you alluded to the fact that some of our military officers are trained in Sandos, which is the British equivalent of West Point in the United States, and the equivalent of our defense academy here in Nigeria. And so there is that historical tie, both in terms of training and operations. And so the British have been here. They have been in Nigeria. It's not a new thing. What they're trying to do is to deepen that collaboration and relationship to be able to deal with the threats, the present threats, and the evolving threats of the future. So it's a matter of deepening it, not that they are starting a new relationship, because that relationship has been there. They just need to grow it, considering that the security landscape over the years had evolved into several other security threats, including terrorism, insurgency, banditry, kidnapping for ransom, and all what have you. And so I don't see any impediment to that working out. I think they will be able to work it out perfectly.
Some time ago, the president did talk about, it wasn't quite publicized, but I understand that there were talks about sending a delegation to the UK to, try to initiate negotiation regarding prisoner swap deals, because Nigeria and the UK government have some sort of agreement regarding that. And there were hopes that perhaps the former Deputy Senate President Ike Ekweremadu, who is serving time in UK prison, may be considered for a prisoner swap and return to Nigeria and all of that. Do you think that sort of agreement can also work? Because although I also understand that Senator Ike Ekweremadu is the first person to have been from Nigerian descent to be caught up with that law in the UK. So could that also work?
Why not? Why not? Ike Ekweremadu is not only Nigerian that is in the British prison. And so I think the reason why people are looking at it the way they are doing is because this is a politically exposed person. He's just one individual out of several others that are in the British prisons. And so it has worked in other places. I am sure, though not quite certain, that it probably could have also worked between Nigeria and the UK in the past. So I don't see the reason why prison swap would be such a difficult thing to execute. Even between Russia and the Ukraine that have active war ongoing right now, do every now and then prison swaps. And so nonetheless, two countries that are not at war. So I don't see why it can't work. It should work if both countries are actually determined to make it work.
But considering the fact that it is the first time that law is being flouted by a Nigerian, and then again considering how very serious the British legal system considers that offense, maybe many Nigerians are worried that in the event that happens to become one of the talking points, it may not even be flogged to an extent that it might just be discarded.
I said earlier that people are looking at it from just the perspective of Ike Ekweremadu because he's a politically exposed person.
All right.
You can agree with me that he's not the only Nigerian that is a British prison. And so let's not just particularize this proposition based on one individual. There are other Nigerians that are in British prison that also deserve that swap arrangement. And so what I'm saying is that if the British government and the Nigerian government are determined to make the prison swap work, it will work. Laws are made by human beings. Laws are also enforced by human beings, not the other way around.
All right.
And I equally mentioned that even in two countries where there is active military engagement, they are still able to do prison swap. Therefore, prison swap between two friendly nations that are so historically and culturally tied together
should be much easier, right?
Will be a piece of cake.
All right. Let's look at the coming general elections now. The clock is ticking, of course, and political activities have begun to pick up here in Nigeria, and it is on a very high octane momentum. Now, the United Kingdom is a keen partner when you talk about elections monitoring and observation and what have you. Considering, the turnout of previous elections, the recently concluded elections so far, and the reports coming out of it, many Nigerians believe that the coming elections will be will sort of generate keen interest for the UK election observation teams and what have you. Remember, you have the British Council domicile here in Nigeria and all of that. So what are the likely, incidents that could arise as regards the coming general elections?
Well, it will be the usual incidences. there might be, violence in a few places. There may be incidents of ballot box snatching and, manipulation of results here and there. So it's the usual problems that we have been encountering with our elections as a developing democracy and as an evolving democracy. But I think progress is being made, even as much as we still record those similar occurrences. We're hoping that we've learned lessons from the previous elections that we've had in the past, and that we have put in some remedial measures to ensure that even if we don't eliminate those problems 100%, that we're able to mitigate them down to a certain tolerable levels. But it's difficult to say that they won't happen because you're talking about a country of over 250 million people.
That's right.
With over 90 million registered voters. Even the number of registered voters are far more than the population of a lot of countries in the world. So that is a huge number of people to manage and control. So of course, there will be incidents here and there, but one is, hoping and believing that we will apply lessons from previous elections and they put in remedial measures to mitigate them.
The UK government is a very successful democracy, although there is no perfect democracy anywhere in the world. But the UK, government has been doing very well. I mean, at least compared to Nigeria's democracy of 26 years and counting, right? Now, considering the dramas that emanated during the recently passed Electoral Amendment Bill 2026 and the rejection and the many issues that arose and many, of course, from what many critics said about how the law is not at par with what Nigerians want, do you think that the British election observation organizations will be more keen this time around in observing the coming elections because of the things that have arisen?
You see, I have not been one who is, who is particularly, I don't know how to put it, who is particularly pleased with these foreign election observers, because I do feel most times that they don't have the manpower to actually deploy their personnel to some of the places in the rural areas of this country where some of these violence do occur.
All right.
I won't blame them for that. This is a very massive country, very vast, that for them to be able to have, footprints in every polling unit or every ward in Nigeria is almost practically impossible. And so from my observation, what they do is to stay mostly in the urban areas, particularly state capitals, and then get reports from Nigerians who are in the field. So I don't know. I don't know if those election observation by those foreign nations do make a lot of impact. I think the domestic observers who do have this footprint do much, better work since they are, they have the capacity to deploy people to all the nooks and crannies of the country. And so what those foreign observing mission to me do is to rely on those Nigerians. And so to the extent of the inaccuracy or accuracy of the reporting of those Nigerians is what their own reporting is going to also reflect.
In other words, the reports of the foreign observers are not as accurate as it should be.
They don't do. This is my own opinion. I could be wrong.
Okay.
They don't do much. They don't do much of great election monitoring that one would expect. There's no such thing as election observing or election monitoring, even in their own place, because they conduct very peaceful election. Everybody just go there, cast their vote, and they go home. And so they don't have that experience of the violence and the things that do happen in our own election. Then, of course, you just said that our democracy is just 20-something years old. These are democracies that are century long. And so they have evolved over time. And so their own democracy and the elections have matured. Ours is still evolving, and eventually it's going to get to that point of maturity. And so, yes, I don't have that great confidence in foreign election monitoring. You know, whether it is the British or the European Union, or even the way you have ECOWAS going to some other countries in Africa to go and monitor the elections, or AU sending election observers. I don't have confidence in any of those.
All right. Bish, I would like you to just hold your thoughts for a bit. We'll take a quick break. When we come back, our discussions will continue. Don't go away.
It's a huge task, but we take it on.
Ask him where is the law. National Assembly is not doing hearing on insecurity in Nigeria. It is America that is doing hearing on insecurity in Nigeria.
Monday to Friday on Focus Nigeria, we identify the nagging issues.
So people put people in poverty deliberately, deliberate misplacement of priorities, and brought people on their knees to suffer.
We seek answers to the tough challenges.
And because of
For the former president,
yes,
what I know is that he has not turned his membership card. He has not been attending your meeting.
Leave that to us to deal.
There's no shying away from the issues.
The system is held accountable. The leaders are accountable for the funds, for the resources that they manage.
No sitting on the fence.
The same thing that made you live where you are may confront you.
Focus Nigeria, 10 a.m., Monday to Friday on AIT.
The stories now break online. Don't miss anything from our real-time updates and exclusive content. Follow and participate in discussions on live TV studio programs to shape the narratives. Subscribe, engage, and share from AIT.live at AIT_online on X, AIT Online on Facebook, Official AIT Live on Instagram, TikTok, and Threads, AIT_live, and AIT Livestream 1 on YouTube. Stay connected with AIT. On air, online, on live.
The issues as they break. The multitude, the political figures, the state and non-state actors.
It's a serious threat to democracy.
And our government seem to be incapable of protecting.
The scheming.
This is not a period we should sit back and go. Every part of this country is equal.
The intrigues.
There can be no one person that is bigger than the party.
Deft moves and the momentous declaration.
We didn't get any protection.
I'm not particularly against anybody.
We track and capture them all.
I don't believe it was for that reason in politics.
Follow in-depth analysis and no-holds-barred interviews.
Armed forces of the country is well capable. They need the political will.
Are they just waking up from sleep? Is there complacency?
Feel the pulse of happenings in the political arena on AIT Democracy Today. Widely acclaimed authority on politics. Monday to Friday, 7 p.m. Nigerian time.
This is Democracy Today on AIT. If you're just joining us, we're discussing the visits of Mr. President Bola Tinubu to the UK at the instance of King Charles III. What are the likely gains from that meeting? What will it benefit Nigeria's economy in terms of energy, maritime, security, and even the creative economy and tourism? I still have right here with me former U.S. Army Captain Bish Johnson, and he joins me via Zoom. Thank you for waiting, Bish. Let me ask you this regard now. You see, some other talking points that are on the table for Mr. President and, you know, the business summit with UK private investors is especially energy, mining, the creative economy. Let me stop there for a bit. Now, I'm sure you are aware that the presidential villa in Abuja runs on solar as we speak, and we've had stories recently that it will be completely disconnected from the national grid very soon. Now, the national grid itself keeps collapsing. This year alone, it has collapsed a number of times. Now, if a government cannot provide its own energy, do you think the British government will believe in investing in the energy sector of a country such as Nigeria when the country actually has all that it takes to provide its own energy?
Well, we have most of what it takes to provide our own energy. I don't think we have everything it takes to provide our own energy because, as you know, we are not very technologically advanced. And so in that respect, we have a lot to gain from the British people. Britain is a very highly technological advanced country. And so we can tap into that technology to advance, our own energy sector. There's a huge potential of benefit between the United Kingdom and Nigeria. This is the largest economy in Africa, the most populated nation in Africa. And so this is a massive market, a huge market for the British people. And so that, and let me tell you something about investment. Where you have, in places where investments are riskier is where you have a lot of benefit. And so those who dared, yes, and because what is business? Business is all about taking risk.
Okay.
And so those who have that, those who are able to take risk, stand to reap from that risk. You cannot be a rich man or a billionaire, the likes of Dangote or Tony Lumelu, if you're not willing to take risk. If you ask them, they will tell you how much risk they have taken in the course of the business empire they have built. Not every money they have invested in businesses had the businesses survived. And so the British people have a huge opportunity in Nigeria to make investment in Nigeria in the energy sector, in the solid mineral sector, and with our cooperation with them, I think that sector will be stabilized. I think the steps are already being taken to stabilize that sector. For me, the biggest mistake I see is, having a centralized, what is called national grid, this centralized, electricity transmission, such that when something happens in one state, it affects almost the entire country. I think we have to decentralize that. And I believe that the process of that decentralization is already taking place following the act that was signed by the late President Muhammad Buhari. In my home state of Imo, my governor has taken advantage of that decentralization of the energy sector. We now have what is called the Orashi Electricity Distribution Company. The state is also, Governor Zodima is already also working in the power generation. In my hometown of Ebema, where they have natural gas, they are using the natural gas to, revamp some of the turbines that the contracts were awarded during the time of Olusegun Obasanjo, but later abandoned. So the Imo state government, from my understanding, has acquired those turbines, and they are almost at the point of completion. Almost 80% from what I understand. And so with that decentralization of generation and transmission and distribution, you will see that which is more or less like liberalization. Just the same thing we did with the communication sector. You see how effective our communication sector is right now. MTN and those of them who took the risk to invest in that sector used to be Nitel. If anybody who knew Nitel then, you would be very scared to invest in that sector. But you see, those who had invested in that sector, like MTN and the rest of them, you see how much benefit they are reaping from it. So anybody that has that zeal and is ready to take the risk of investing in Nigerian energy sector, it stands to benefit so much because eventually that sector is going to stabilize.
Let's look at the maritime sector now. It's a very huge one as well. And the deal signed, already is a £746 million deal. And they talked about Nigerian Port Authority about developing the Tinkan Island port, the Apapa port. But these are not the only two, seaports Nigeria's got. There's the Warri port, there's the Calabar port. The government has consistently talked about decongesting the Lagos, the Lagos ports. These other ports were not mentioned. Even the Onitsha port can be dredged and then expanded. Is it not about time that those ones are also considered? Because in these agreements, those ones are not even mentioned. But in the final analysis, the Nigerian people will be the ones to benefit. The government benefits too. So those are the ones that are not even mentioned. Could it also be scaled down to these other ports, Calabar, Warri, and Onitsha?
Absolutely. When I believe it was either you or Ijoma that we are talking about those ports, I had expected that we would not put all our eggs, in one basket by concentrating in Lagos. That it should have been also be decentralized, like what I told you about the energy sector.
Okay.
By looking at those other ports that you have talked about, Calabar, Warri, Port Harcourt, and even Onitsha. Because if you look at what is going on right now in Iran, and this should teach Nigeria a lesson. Nigeria should learn from all these crises that are taking place in other countries, such as Iran and the Ukraine. You cannot take all of your critical infrastructure and you put all of them in one place. That is a recipe for disaster. You will be crushed. If Iran had concentrated all of their critical infrastructure in Tehran, they will be obliterated, and that country, in fact, they would have surrendered by now. So Nigeria has to be able to strategically site its critical infrastructure across the country. You can't predict when war can be brought upon you. War can be brought upon you at any time by any adversary. So you must not only think of today, you must think of tomorrow. And like the former Secretary of Defense of the United States, Donald Rumsfeld, when I was in service, used to say, you go to war with the army you have, and not the one you wish you had. And so if Nigeria continues to concentrate its critical infrastructure in one place, as they are doing, either as a result of sentiments or for whatever reason it is, Nigeria will face similar fate as some of all these countries that concentrated their critical infrastructures in one place. So it is time for us to strategically, for survival purposes, for survival's sake, distribute our critical infrastructure, their engine rooms, their plants, all across the country. So that way it is impossible for any country to invade Nigeria and cripple the country.
We really hope that no country invades Nigeria anytime at all. Anyways, talking about tourism, right? Tourism is another sector that Nigeria could be benefiting from right now massively, but it's only on a very small percentage as we speak. But hundreds of years ago, traditional artifacts were taken away forcibly, and many of them rather, are lying in UK museums, and several of them, over the years though, the government of the UK may have made some money from them, from tourism, from tourists who come to view and all of that. There have been talks about repatriating them, but the UK government has also protested that they're not sure whether these artifacts will be protected. And it raises the question that how can you be asking the owner of a property whether they can, look after them properly and all of that? Because that is not on the talking table, but could that also, be introduced to the UK authorities so they can be repatriated and then not just that, pay royalties and compensations for the profits they've made from them over the years?
Well, I think there is sense in both sides. In Nigeria, wanting to repatriate what has become its historical and cultural artifacts. And there have been some that have been repatriated in the past. I'm aware that there were some that were returned to ancient Benin Kingdom.
Yes, quite a few.
However, we cannot However, we can't dismiss the concerns that are raised by the British. that they are not sure that if they return them to Nigeria, that they can be protected. You know, our country is still evolving. You know, we are still developing. We don't have that many museums where these things can be brought, and we have not really invested in that sector. And until we invest in that sector, I doubt that we will be able to instill the confidence in particularly in Britain, that if those artifacts are returned to Nigeria, that they can be protected. But what they can do for us, and what we should be asking, is that they should partner with us to grow that sector by building museums, just like the ones they have in UK and the ones they have in France, things of that nature, so that we can develop that sector and be able to repatriate those artifacts. Yes, I believe they should pay reparations for how long they have held them. But instead of them paying reparations, let's convert that reparations to the grants and the collaboration and cooperation that they can give Nigeria in terms of finances for Nigeria to be able to develop its tourism sector by building the type of museums that they have in their home country in Nigeria here, and returning them to Nigeria. You saw the issue of looted funds that are being returned to Nigeria.
Okay.
Those countries insist that Nigeria must devote those monies to projects that they can monitor and see. Because if you don't do that and you repatriate the money to Nigeria, it will be looted again and sent back to their country again. And then we'll be going back to their country again and be asking for the looted money to be returned to our country again. And the cycle will continue.
Like a vicious
cycle. I
cycle.
don't blame them. And yes, it will just continue. So I don't blame them when they put all these conditions, because you know who we are. You know, Nigerians know themselves. And they know that some of these issues that are being raised by these people are true.
All right. Former U.S. Army Captain Bis Johnson, thank you very much for joining Democracy Today on AIT tonight. It's always a pleasure having you. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you for having me.
That's our show for today. Don't forget, you can follow us on all social media handles. You can also find me on all social media handles. I'll be waiting for you there, definitely. That's the show for today. I'll see you again tomorrow. I am Enemaku Ojoshegbe. Bye for now.